What if the smile you see is just armor, and behind it lies a cry nobody can hear? Picture the scene. The soldier walks through the front door after months, maybe even years away. There are tight hugs, tears of relief, phones flashing to capture the moment everyone has been waiting for. He smiles. He smiles for his family, for his friends, for anyone watching from the outside who thinks he came back okay. But what if that smile isn't a sign of peace, but of survival? What you're about to discover might surprise you. On the outside, everything seems normal. The uniform has been folded, the bags put away, and routines slowly resumed. The world moves on as if the war stayed on the other side of the ocean. But inside him, something is still fighting, a sound that keeps returning, a memory that shows up uninvited, a constant state of alert. Invisible traumas leave no marks on the skin, yet they shape every thought. Have you ever been through something like this? Or do you know someone who seems fine, but is never truly at peace? Soldiers who return from war carry stories that rarely fit into word stories that don't appear in photos or celebration videos. They quickly learn the world doesn't want to hear about sleepless nights, about fear that strikes without warning, about guilt that weighs heavy even when no one accuses them. So they smile, because smiling is easier than trying to explain something they can't even name. Maybe you've seen that smile before. It's at family lunches, friend gatherings, social media posts, a practiced, almost automatic smile, a silent shield. After all, how do you talk about a pain that doesn't bleed? How do you explain that, even far from the battlefield, your mind is still fighting? Stay with me until the end, because this story goes far deeper than it first appears. The truth is, many of these soldiers return physically whole, but emotionally shattered. The war ends on paper but not in memory. And the scariest part, almost no one notices. Society applauds their return, thanks them for their service, but rarely asks, "How are you, really?" And when they do ask, they expect a short, simple, comfortable answer, "I'm fine." Always fine. That silence builds up day after day, in the middle of the night, when the house is asleep, in the middle of the day, when everything feels too normal. That's where the inner cry grows louder, a cry muffled by the need to appear strong, to not worry others, to not become a burden. Because soldiers are trained to endure, not to ask for help. And maybe, as you watch this, there's someone around you living exactly like this. Or maybe it's you. Maybe that smile is part of your daily routine too. What you're about to discover could change how you see these stories and the people silently carrying them. There are battles that leave no medals. There are wars that go on long after the last shot is fired. And there are soldiers who return home, but never fully return to themselves. And it's precisely at this point where the smile deceives, and silence speaks loudest that this story begins to reveal what almost no one sees. Maybe that's exactly why stories like this need to be told. Because silence isolates, but listening brings people together. When someone realizes they're not alone in their invisible pain, something inside begins to shift. If this resonates with you, if any of these words touched something deep within, leave a comment below about what moved you most. Sometimes, writing just one simple sentence is enough to ease a weight that's been carried in silence for far too long. Every comment builds a bridge between those watching quietly and those finally finding the courage to speak, between soldiers who've returned from war and the people living alongside them every day, without knowing what's truly going on behind that smile. Your participation here is what helps this channel grow and reach more people who need to feel seen, understood, and held. And if, as you listen to this story, you think of someone specific, someone who always says they're okay, but whose eyes seem distant, liking this video helps this message travel further. It's not just a click, it's a quiet way of saying, "This matters," a way to show the algorithm and, more importantly, other people that talking about invisible trauma is also an act of care. If you feel this kind of content needs to keep existing, please subscribe, not as just another number but as part of a community that chooses to listen more deeply. Look with greater empathy, and never ignore pain just because it doesn't show on the outside. Each new subscriber keeps alive the possibility of sharing more real, profound, necessary stories. Here no one has to prove their strength all the time. Here, truth can exist without filters. And as we move forward together, story after story, you might realize that the smile that once seemed like mere resilience could also be the first silent signal of someone asking to be heard. Because it's right here when listening begins and silence breaks, that everything starts to take on new meaning. When the plane lands and the doors open, there's a collective sigh that seems to stretch across time. The mission is over. The danger is behind. There are hurried hugs, flags raised, applause trying to fill all the accumulated silences. To an observer, returning from war feels almost like a familiar script. The hero comes home, life resumes its course, and the hard chapter closes. Everything seems normal, to normal. But while the world celebrates the ending, something inside him remains suspended as if it never got the message that it's finally safe to rest. On the outside, there's a routine waiting, a bed that feels strangely quiet, breakfast that smells like home, conversations about simple things, small decisions, everyday commitments. It's in this contrast that the hidden truth begins to surface. War didn't just steal time, it stole pieces of his mindset, fragments of calm, parts of an identity that no longer know where they fit. The soldier returns with a sense of duty fulfilled, but his inner mission remains uncomprehended. And no one notices because everything seems to be working as it should. There's collective relief when he says, "I'm okay." That sentence reassures the family, comforts friends, and ends further questions. It creates a silent agreement. We move on. And he does. He goes back to work, makes decisions, laughs at the right moments. Normalcy becomes a carefully rehearsed performance. But behind the scenes, the impact of what he lived continues shaping every reaction. His body is home, but his mind still responds to signals no one else can see. Now I want to go even deeper because this is where the journey splits into two parallel realities. The visible and the hidden. The visible one has photos, dates, reunions. The invisible one carries questions that find no space to exist. How do I turn off this constant state of alert? How do I trust silence when it once meant danger? How do I make simple decisions when my mind was trained to survive extreme scenarios? These questions don't appear in homecoming speeches, but they echo in the gaps of the day, in moments when no one's watching. The return also brings a strange sense of displacement. The world kept moving while he was away. People changed, places changed, and he changed too in ways he can't quite explain. There's a subtle shock in realizing that what once felt important now seems distant, almost irrelevant. The transformation isn't just emotional, it's a quiet reconfiguration of how he sees life itself. The problem, that new lens isn't shared by those around him, and slowly, he starts to feel present in a place he no longer recognizes. Normalcy comes at a price. It demands quick answers, appropriate emotions, predictable reactions. But someone returning from war carries revelations that don't fit this mold. Laughter comes late. Sleep doesn't obey. Memories insist on revisiting scenes that weren't invited. This isn't weakness, it's impact. It's a mind that learned to survive, and now must relearn how to live. Yet this process is rarely visible and almost never understood. There's also the silent pressure to be grateful to be back, to be alive, to be home. And he is grateful, but gratitude doesn't erase what was lived. Gratitude doesn't repair what was broken inside. Still, many choose silence so they won't seem ungrateful or disappoint those who expected a simple happy ending. The journey continues, but now it unfolds in an inner territory with no clear maps and no applause. And so life goes on, at least on the surface. Weeks pass, months pile up, and everyone assumes the return was complete. But something never came back from the battlefield. It stayed trapped in decisions made under pressure, in moments of fear that redefined priorities, in truths never shared. The soldier learns to live with this absence just as one learns to live with a constant noise. It never disappears. It just becomes part of life's background hum. Meanwhile, the world keeps asking for simple answers to complex questions. Are you better now? Have you moved on? Questions that seem harmless but carry a silent expectation of closure. As if pain had an expiration date. As if transformation came with an off switch. The truth is, returning from war isn't an ending, it's an inflection point. A moment when everything looks normal, but nothing is quite the same. Maybe that's why so many carry this journey alone, because explaining it takes energy, and just living already consumes nearly everything. Because putting it into words might open doors they're not ready to walk through yet. So life goes on, with its obligations and choices while the mind slowly tries to reorganize what was shaken. There's no public announcement of this inner battle. It happens in details, in pauses, in silences that go unnoticed. And it's precisely in the space between what the world sees and what no one perceives that signs begin to emerge that normal might just be a thin layer over something far deeper. An inner territory that holds answers, but also new questions. A place where the real journey is still unfolding, asking for attention, for time, for someone to truly listen. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper because this is where the invisible wounds begin to show themselves in quiet, almost imperceptible ways to outsiders, yet impossible to ignore for those living it. There are no sirens, no visible alarms, no open wounds. What exists are nights that never seem to end even when the body is exhausted. Sleep comes light and fragmented, vanishing at the slightest silence. The room is dark, the house is quiet, but the mind stays lit, revisiting scenes that never asked permission to return. During the day, the world demands quick answers, presence, productivity, and he delivers. He keeps appointments, makes decisions, holds ordinary conversations. But there's a subtle delay between what happens and what he feels. His gaze sometimes drifts to a fixed point as if following something no one else can see. It's not ordinary distraction, it's a brief, involuntary dive into memories that surface without warning. Observers might think it's just tiredness, but those who live it know its impact. Silences also change shape. Before, silence meant rest. Now, silence can feel like a threat, carrying phantom sounds, unanswered questions, images that refuse to fade. That's why many keep the TV on, the radio playing any noise to keep the mind from wandering into certain places. This is a hidden truth, rarely spoken. Noise becomes protection. Emptiness becomes risk. The invisible marks don't follow clear logic. They appear in the middle of a simple conversation, triggered by a familiar scent, a street that resembles another left behind. Tiny triggers unnoticed by others completely shift his inner state. His survival-trained mind reacts before reason can catch up. Heart races, body tenses, breathing changes, all in seconds without apparent cause. To those around him, nothing happened. To him, something just collapsed. There's also a fatigue that rest can't fix, an emotional exhaustion that builds up even on peaceful days. It doesn't come from doing too much, but from holding back too much. Holding reactions, stories, questions, because explaining means opening internal doors that might not be ready to be crossed. So once again, silence feels like the safest choice, not because it's comfortable, but because it's controllable. The sleepless nights aren't just about insomnia. They're about vigilance, about the feeling that fully relaxing might be dangerous, even at home, even in safety. Something inside remains alert, as if still on duty. This inner journey has no uniform, no medals, no external recognition. It unfolds behind the scenes of ordinary life while everyone believes the worst is over. Distant gazes tell stories the mouth can't narrate. Sometimes they reveal longing for something that should never have existed. Other times, they show the constant effort to understand who he's become after everything. The transformation isn't linear or visible. It's a slow reorganization of identity, a forced adaptation to a version of himself that still feels strange. And in the middle of it all comes the unspoken question: how do I move forward when essential parts of me were left behind? These human signs are easy to recognize if you know what to look for. Sudden irritability, gradual withdrawal, difficulty feeling full joy. None of this is exaggeration. None of it is drama. They're natural responses to experiences that surpassed ordinary limits. The problem: without visible wounds, these reactions are often misread as character flaws, as coldness, as lack of will. And that misunderstanding deepens the isolation even more. Small decisions now carry enormous weight. Choosing to leave the house, accepting an invitation, Entering a crowded room. Each choice involves internal calculations no one imagines. The impact isn't in the outcome but in the effort it took to get there. And when the day ends, the feeling isn't victory but survival. Another day crossed. Most delicate of all, these invisible marks coexist with genuine moments of normalcy. There are real laughs, true lightness, real hope. This makes everything even more confusing. If good moments exist, why doesn't the weight go away? That contradiction breeds guilt, the idea that feeling pain after surviving isn't allowed. And so another layer of silence forms. These realizations don't come all at once. They accumulate. In fragments, a changed behavior, a new habit, a growing distance. For those living it, it feels like constantly trying to explain something without words. For observers, it just seems like a phase. But phases pass. These marks don't. They ask for time. Listening, understanding, space to exist without judgment. And it's at this point in the journey that it becomes clear. The hardest battles rarely make noise. They happen in silence and details, in the gaps between one commitment and the next. And while the world keeps turning, these marks remain waiting. For the moment they can be seen not as weakness, but as part of a deep, ongoing transformation. Type below, I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper because this is exactly where the silent isolation begins to take shape, not as a conscious choice, but as an almost automatic adaptation. He's physically present. He sits at the table, responds when called, joins gatherings. But inside, there's a hard-to-measure distance, like a part of him learned to observe life from the outside, always keeping one step back, a safe space between what happens and what is felt. This withdrawal doesn't draw attention because he's learned to hide it well. The isolation doesn't happen all at once. It's built through small daily choices, avoiding certain conversations, giving short answers, smiling at the right time and retreating right after. Not out of rudeness but out of emotional economy. Every interaction costs energy, and that energy always feels scarce. So he filters, selects, reduces. Gradually, his circle shrinks and almost no one notices because there's no conflict, no explosion, no explanation. Just silence. There's a hidden truth in this. Isolation is often a form of protection. Staying distant feels safer than risking being misunderstood, because explaining what's inside would mean revisiting places he spends all day trying to keep locked. It would mean turning confusing sensations into clear words. It would mean trusting that someone will truly listen without trying to fix, minimize, or rush him. And that kind of trust, after everything, isn't simple. His mind remains in alert mode even in familiar settings. Crowded rooms, loud laughter, unpredictable movements, all exhausting. So he chooses the corner of the room, the nearest exit, the quickest way back home. Small, nearly invisible decisions that reveal a mindset shaped by intense experiences. His physical presence deceives. His body is there but his attention is always ready to retreat. Over time, people start saying he's quieter, more reserved. Some see it as maturity, others as coldness. Few imagine this silence is the result of a complex inner journey of constant calculations and emotional vigilance. He's learned that showing too much can be dangerous, that feeling too deeply can unravel everything. So he keeps emotions in tightly sealed compartments even if it costs meaningful connections. Behind the scenes, this isolation also affects how he sees himself. He feels different, out of place, as if always out of sync. The world feels too fast at times, too superficial at others. Small talk drains him, minor worries seem distant, and this silent difference deepens his urge to withdraw, to not burden others with questions too deep to share. There are moments he wants to connect, to share, to divide the weight, to ease the load. But when the chance comes, something jams. His voice doesn't come out. The subject changes. The moment passes, and then comes the inner question, why is this so hard? This repetition creates a quiet cycle of withdrawal and frustration. It's not that he doesn't want to be with people. It's that he no longer knows how to be fully present. Routine helps maintain appearances, work, appointments, tasks. All of it creates the illusion of full functionality. But when the day ends and silence returns, the inner distance becomes clearer. This isolation isn't just social, it's emotional. It's the feeling that no one truly accesses what's happening inside, and over time, that feeling becomes habit. Being alone feels simpler than explaining why he feels alone even when surrounded. Most delicately, this withdrawal is rarely questioned. The world respects silence because it doesn't disturb. There are no explicit cries for help, no obvious signs. So everyone assumes he's fine. And that lack of questions reinforces the idea that hiding works. So he keeps playing the expected role while the most sensitive part of his story stays locked away. This dynamic influences major decisions, accepting or declining invitations, maintaining or ending relationships, opening or closing doors. Every choice is crossed by a silent question. Will this require more than I can give right now? And often, the answer is no, not from lack of care, but from lack of inner space. The impact of this slowly reshapes his life, redrawing relationships without anyone seeing the real reason. Yet this isolation doesn't erase the human desire for connection. It just suspends it, waiting for a safe context, an attentive gaze, a moment when you won't have to explain everything. This tension between pulling away and wanting closeness is part of the ongoing transformation. A transformation that's invisible but actively reorganizing priorities, boundaries, and expectations. And as he continues like this, present on the outside, absent within, the journey deepens. Because isolation isn't the end of the story. It's a phase, a mechanism, a signal that something deeper is asking for space to be recognized. And it's precisely at this point where silence seems permanently settled that subtle cracks begin to appear, tiny openings through which other truths start to emerge. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper, because the weight of carrying everything alone doesn't just come from what was lived, but from the silent belief that settles afterward. The belief that no one will understand, that trying to explain would be useless, that showing vulnerability might shatter the image of strength everyone expects. This belief doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built, slowly reinforced by averted glances, rushed questions, shallow advice that tries to fix in minutes what took years to form. Carrying everything alone becomes automatic, not because it's easy, but because it feels safer. He learns that being strong all the time is the only way to keep functioning, even when everything inside feels like it's crumbling. He adjusts his posture, controls his tone, organizes inner chaos into tightly sealed compartments. This organization doesn't bring peace, only control. And control demands constant effort, an effort that's invisible but exhausting. There's a specific kind of fatigue that comes from this, not physical tiredness from hard work, nor mental fatigue from a busy day. It's existential fatigue, the result of sustaining a version of himself that never relaxes. Every emotion must be measured, every reaction filtered, every word weighed before spoken. This inner vigilance shapes his mindset, turning silence into strategy and solitude into routine. Behind this apparent strength, there's fear of not being understood, fear of being judged, fear of hearing "You should have moved on by now." Because when pain isn't visible, it's often questioned, and he knows this. He's seen it in subtle comments, hesitant glances, quick attempts to solve that give up too soon. So he chooses not to expose. He chooses to endure. He chooses to move on. But enduring isn't the same as healing. The weight doesn't vanish. It It settles on his shoulders, his chest, his restless mind. It flows into automatic decisions, into choices made more from survival than desire. The journey continues, but with an extra load no one sees. And the longer it goes on, the harder it seems to share, because silence has already become his identity. There's a deep contradiction here. Even as he believes no one will understand, there's a quiet longing to be truly seen, to say "I'm not okay," without having to explain every detail, to be strong without having to be invulnerable. But that possibility feels too distant. So he keeps playing the expected role even when it costs vital pieces of himself. This belief also shapes how he relates to his own suffering. He minimizes it, compares it to worse stories, bigger tragedies. He tells himself he shouldn't complain, that he's already past it, that others had it harder. But that comparison brings no relief, only pushes the pain deeper, where it keeps working in silence. Being strong all the time becomes an internal requirement, a standard too hard to maintain. There's no room to fail, to hesitate, to ask for help. Any sign of fragility is quickly corrected. He demands more of himself than anyone else would, and that constant self-pressure shapes major decisions. Taking on too much, avoiding dependence, solving everything alone. The impact shows up slowly as emotional burnout, distance, a persistent feeling of being on the edge. The hidden truth: this unbroken strength wasn't chosen out of pride but out of necessity. In extreme contexts, strength saved lives. Controlling emotions was essential. Quick decisions made the difference. But outside that context, these same tools start demanding a high price. His mind keeps operating in maximum alert even when danger is gone. And turning off that mode isn't simple, because it's become part of who he is. There's also the difficulty of trusting that someone will listen without trying to fix, trusting he won't be seen as weak, trusting that his timeline will be respected. This distrust isn't rational, it's the result of past experiences where openness found no safe harbor. So once again, the choice seems clear. Better to carry it alone than risk opening up and regretting it over time. This weight shapes how he sees himself in the world. He feels different, like he operates on his own rhythm, like he doesn't fully belong anywhere. He keeps going, fulfilling duties, delivering results, but rarely feels whole. The transformation is happening even if unseen. A transformation marked by resilience, silent adaptations, and a strength that impresses outwardly, but wears him down inwardly. And yet, this journey isn't static. Something begins to shift when the weight becomes too heavy to ignore. Tiny cracks appear in the armor, moments when control slips. Instances where exhaustion speaks louder. Not as collapse but as warning, a signal that carrying everything alone has limits, that absolute strength isn't sustainable forever. These realizations don't arrive dramatically. They come quietly in recurring thoughts, unspoken desires, internal questions that keep returning. How much longer? How far? The journey continues, but something changes in how he views this burden, not as proof of worth, but as a load he might not have to carry alone forever. It's at this fragile point where the belief in being misunderstood starts to waver, that new possibilities begin to appear. Still timid, still uncertain but present. And it's precisely from here, when strength starts showing signs of fatigue, that the story deepens even more. Comment below: I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper, because there comes a moment when the armor begins to fail. Not dramatically, not in front of everyone, but in a simple, almost ordinary episode that exposes what's been held together by sheer will. It could be an unexpected sound in the middle of the night, a metallic echo that triggers a reaction before the mind catches up. It could be a memory sparked by a common smell, a familiar street, a movie scene no one would think dangerous. Or it could simply be another sleepless night when silence becomes so heavy it's unbearable. This moment doesn't announce itself. It seeps in. His heart races without warning. Breathing shortens. Thoughts collide. His body reacts as if he's in another time, another place. Outside nothing happens. Inside everything does. That's when the hidden truth reveals itself most clearly. The inner cry can no longer be contained. It refuses to stay muffled. The strength that held everything together starts demanding a higher price. This rupture isn't a visible breakdown, it's a limit reached. A realization that something must change, even if he doesn't know what yet. The control that once worked can no longer organize it all. A mind trained to endure realizes that enduring without pause isn't sustainable. And this awareness is frightening, because strength has always meant survival. Questioning it feels risky, but ignoring the signs becomes impossible. At this point in the journey, small things carry disproportionate weight. A careless comment, a routine demand, a minor delay. The accumulated load finds a crack and spills out, not as weakness, but as overflow of vigilance, of containment, of silence. His mind, tired of guarding, starts releasing fragments, repetitive thoughts, intrusive images, unanswered questions. How much longer can I hold this? The simple episode becomes a mirror. It shows the gap between seeming okay and being okay has grown too wide. The functional version no longer represents the whole. Truth. This revelation doesn't come with solutions, only awareness. And awareness changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The journey takes on a new shape, more complex, more honest. There's also a strange guilt in this moment. Guilt for not keeping up, for still feeling pain when it should be over, for needing more than he thought he would. That guilt tries to push the cry back inside, but it's too late. The impact has been felt. The sleepless night leaves marks on the next day. The sound keeps echoing. The memory refuses to return to its box. Behind the scenes, something begins to reorganize, not as immediate healing, but as a shift in direction. Decisions start being influenced by this new awareness. Avoidance doesn't work. Silence doesn't work. Pretending doesn't work. The rupture opens space for deeper questions about identity, limits, choices. Who am I beyond strength? What happens if I stop pretending everything's under control? This turning point is lonely because it's rarely shared. It happens inwardly, in the gap between one day and the next, with no witnesses. But it's also a moment of revelation. The inner cry isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. It signals that something needs attention, care, a new way of being. Ignoring it would mean repeating patterns that no longer serve. The transformation doesn't arrive as a promise. It emerges as necessity. No guarantees, only the certainty that staying the same isn't an option. His mindset begins to sway between the old habit of enduring and the new possibility of acknowledging limits. This inner conflict is intense, silent, and decisive. It redefines priorities, reshapes expectations, and prepares the ground for movements not yet cleared up. This breaking point doesn't end anything. It opens a phase where the inner cry begins to be heard, even if confusely. It opens space where the journey shifts from mere survival to seeking meaning. It opens the chance to look at what was lived without full armor. And this opening, though frightening, carries a potential impact still taking shape. It's in this atmosphere between what broke and what hasn't yet been born that the story moves forward. The simple episode is already behind, but its echoes keep reverberating, demanding different choices, demanding a new kind of courage. From here, the path becomes more delicate, more truthful, and prepares the ground for encounters that could change everything. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now, I want to go even deeper because this is where the truth that was never spoken begins, pressing for space. Not as an organized confession, but as loose fragments that return without warning. Stories stuck in the throat, scenes the mind guards in silence, reappearing when least expected. No script, no chronological order, just quick images, incomplete sensations, emotions that come and go, leaving a trail hard to explain. These untold stories aren't just memories, they're entire chapters of a journey that found no place to exist. He knows exactly where he was, what he heard, what he decided in that instant. He also knows what he felt afterward. But turning it into words means crossing a delicate inner border, because to tell it is to relive it. And reliving means feeling the impact, the doubt, the tension all over again. So often, he chooses to keep it inside, not from forgetting, but from self-protection. These scenes return in unexpected moments. A neutral detail connects to something deeper, a tone of voice, a shadow, a sequence of images. His mind makes rapid, automatic associations. In seconds, he's back in a place he'd rather keep distant. No conscious choice. The memory just happens, and with it comes an emotional charge that finds no words. His body reacts, breathing changes, thoughts accelerate. All of it without anyone noticing. There's also guilt, not from one single reason but layered. Guilt over decisions made under pressure, over decisions that couldn't be made, over surviving when others didn't. This guilt doesn't accuse directly, it seeps into recurring thoughts, into unanswerable questions. Could it have been different? Did I do enough? These questions aren't seeking solutions. They simply insist on existing. The hidden truth. Many of these stories don't fit into ordinary conversations, not because they're exaggerated, but because they're too deep for daily rhythm. The world wants summaries, quick explanations, clear endings. But real experience doesn't work that way. It's made of gray areas, imperfect decisions, consequences that unfold over time. Telling it all would require a kind of listening rarely available behind the scenes. He carries these revelations like invisible boxes, each with its own weight, some lighter, others nearly impossible to move. He's learned to distribute them throughout the day so none crash down at once. This skill maintains functionality but at a high cost, because sustaining what's never been spoken constantly drains emotional energy. Empathy peaks here precisely because these truths aren't dramatic in the usual sense. They're deeply human, made of fear, doubt, responsibility, loss. No clear villains, no perfect heroes, just people doing their best in extreme conditions. Recognizing this demands emotional maturity, requires letting go of simple narratives. And that letting go isn't always comfortable. His survival trained mind tries to rationalize these truths. Talking won't help. The past can't change. Moving on is the only way. Partly true, but another part remains ignored when everything stays silent. A part that asks not for blame, but for integration. Because what isn't integrated keeps returning, asking for attention in other ways. These inner revelations shape silent choices, avoiding certain topics, changing environments, keeping emotional distance. All of it helps keep the stories locked away but also limits the depth of connection. He becomes someone who knows much about himself, but shares little, and that asymmetry creates loneliness even when surrounded. There are moments he almost speaks, the sentence starts forming. His breath changes, his gaze seeks support, but something interrupts, an old fear, a past experience, a sudden doubt, and the truth retreats inside. Asterisk, not as defeat, but as postponement. Maybe another day, maybe someone else, maybe when it's easier. That maybe accompanies the journey like an indefinite promise. The transformation isn't about telling everything or exposing every detail. It's about recognizing these truths exist and have impact, that ignoring them doesn't dissolve them, that prolonged silence also communicates something, just in a distorted way. This recognition changes his relationship with the past. It doesn't erase it but repositions it. It stops being a hidden enemy and becomes part of a larger story still being written. Gradually, the idea forms that these truths might find some space. Not immediately, not completely, but as a real, fragile possibility. And it's this possibility that begins to shift the journey's course, because when the truth that was never spoken is finally acknowledged, even just internally, something moves. The weight shifts, the guilt loosens its grip, the scenes return with less violence. This movement doesn't end anything. It simply opens a new layer of experience, a layer where empathy deepens, not just for others, but for himself. And it's at this sensitive point where guarded stories begin to breathe, that the journey prepares for a decisive encounter. An encounter that won't erase the past, but might transform how it's carried. Right below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper, because it's at this sensitive point in the journey that something begins to change, not through willpower, not through a grand decision, but through a nearly imperceptible human detail. Not a magic solution, not a perfect speech, not someone arriving with ready answers, just a person, a gesture, a listening that doesn't interrupt, a gaze that stays even when silence lingers. For the first time in a long time, he feels he doesn't need to explain everything to be understood. This moment doesn't happen in a special setting. It can arise in an ordinary conversation, a neutral place, a day that seemed like any other. Someone notices something off rhythm, a different kind of tiredness, a heavier silence, a reaction held back too tightly, and instead of ignoring it, that person stays, doesn't force words, doesn't minimize, doesn't try to fix, just stays. And that staying changes everything, because when someone truly sees you, something inside reorganizes. The defense-trained mind hesitates not from weakness, but from surprise. It's strange to be seen without performing strength, disorienting, to feel that the hidden truth can exist here even if still unspoken. The other's presence creates a new space, of emotional territory he hasn't visited in a long time. This true listening doesn't demand full revelations. Sometimes it holds just fragments, an incomplete sentence, a longer sigh, and I can't explain. And that's enough. Because behind the scenes, something important happens. The weight is no longer concentrated in one place. It still exists, but now it's shareable. Even if subtly, the journey, once seemingly solitary and endless, gains unexpected company. The impact isn't immediate. No instant relief, no total clarity, but there's a signal that maybe he doesn't have to fight alone all the time, that strength and support can coexist. This possibility shakes deep internal beliefs. It challenges the idea that no one will understand, not because everyone now does, but because someone tried. True listening also changes how he sees himself for the first time. His inner narrative meets a mirror that doesn't distort. No judgment, no rush, just recognition. This creates a silent but intense transformation. His identity begins expanding beyond the one who endures everything. Space opens for nuance, for limits, for humanity. This person doesn't save him, doesn't solve anything, doesn't erase the past, but they point to a different path, one where vulnerability isn't danger, where the other's presence doesn't require masks. This path is scary because it's new, and everything new demands conscious choices. To open a little more, to trust a little more, to risk shared silence instead of absolute isolation. In the days that follow, this experience echoes. Small adjustments happen, a less automatic response, a silence less defensive, a thought that considers previously unthinkable alternatives. The journey remains difficult, but something has shifted in the inner landscape. The feeling of total solitude loses strength. There's still caution, still fear, but now there's also the memory of being held. This change influences practical decisions: who to talk to, when, how far to go. Nothing is abrupt. Everything unfolds at its own pace. True listening doesn't push, it accompanies. And in that accompaniment, he starts seeing he doesn't have to choose between being strong and being human. Maybe there's a middle ground still being built. The hidden truth, once guarded so carefully, doesn't need to be exposed all at once. It can breathe slowly, take gradual shape, exist without urgency. This recognition reduces internal pressure even if challenges remain. The transformation isn't about changing who he was, but about expanding who he can become from here. It's important to understand, this person who sees him might not stay forever. Sometimes it's a brief encounter, a passing moment, but the impact remains. It proves that listening exists, that holding is possible, that the journey doesn't have to be walked in total silence. That proof permanently alters his mindset, even if discreetly, and from then on, new questions arise, not about enduring, but about living. Not about hiding, but about choosing when and how to share. These questions don't demand immediate answers. They simply signal that something has opened, a crack, a foothold, a beginning. It's in this atmosphere of quiet change where another's presence reveals previously invisible possibilities that the story continues advancing. Because when someone finally sees you, isolation loses a little of its power. And that weakening creates space for movements not yet fully visible, but already forming on the horizon of this journey. Comment below: this makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper, because this is where the beginning of rebuilding announces itself. Not as a spectacular turnaround, but as a discreet, irregular, deeply human process. Healing doesn't come in a straight line. It zigzags, stumbles, retreats, finds unexpected shortcuts. There are days of clarity and days of confusion. Small steps that seem insignificant until suddenly they reveal greater impact than expected. The soldier still carries marks. That doesn't change overnight. What changes is that these marks are no longer completely hidden. Rebuilding begins with minimal decisions: sleeping a little better one night, worse the next, accepting help with something simple, pulling back from something bigger, saying one short sentence about how he feels, and falling silent again. None of it seems heroic. None of it becomes a ready-made story. But behind the scenes, these choices slowly reshape his mindset. Absolute control begins, making room for awareness of limits. And recognizing limits doesn't diminish strength, it repositions it. This rebuilding journey is made of new beginnings that don't erase past falls. Each fall teaches something, even when it's exhausting. Each new start carries a memory that helps choose differently next time. There's no manual, no deadline, There's only presence, attentiveness to his own rhythm, reactions, body and mind signals. This demands a new kind of courage, less visible, but more demanding. There are moments when the old armor feels necessary again. Stressful situations, crowded spaces, hard decisions. The temptation to wear old strength is strong because it worked for so long. And sometimes it still does. Rebuilding doesn't demonize the past, it integrates it. The difference now is choice. The armor isn't permanent anymore. It can be put on and taken off. That flexibility changes everything. The impact of no longer being invisible is subtle but profound. Someone notices when the day weighs heavier. Someone accepts silence without reading it as rejection. Someone respects his timeline. This doesn't solve everything, but it creates support. The hidden truth begins circulating with less fear, even in small doses. The experience stops being a solitary burden and becomes part of a shareable story. However incomplete, rebuilding also means revisiting old decisions with new eyes, not to blame, but to understand what was possible in that context, what wasn't. This revision changes the inner narrative. Judgment gives way to understanding, and understanding paves the way for kinder present choices. The journey takes on a new tone, less survival, more meaning. There are days when everything seems to regress: an unexpected trigger, an intense memory, a bad night's sleep. These moments test patience and trust in the process, but they also reveal something important. The fall is now noticed more quickly, and noticing quickly shortens the way back. The new beginning happens with more awareness, even if it hurts. This is transformation in motion. Rebuilding doesn't erase memory, it changes the relationship with it. The scenes remain but lose some of their control. The mind learns new routes. The body learns new signals of safety. This doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds slowly, in layers, like reorganizing a house after a storm. Not everything returns to its original place. Some things find new uses, others are stored with more care. There's also learning about asking for and accepting help. Not as dependence, but as a mature choice. Asking not as weakness, but as a strategy for continuity. These decisions redefine bonds and strengthen connections that once had no room to exist. The soldier is still strong. The difference now is that strength includes pause, listening, and adaptation. This phase demands patience with one's own inconsistency. No demand for perfect constancy. No expectation of immediate results. Rebuilding honors inner time, not the external calendar. Every small step counts. Every day crossed with greater awareness leaves new marks of learning, not wounds. Little by little, the feeling of invisibility loses ground, not because everything is exposed, but because there's recognition. And recognition changes his posture toward the world, how he enters places, starts conversations, faces hard decisions. His identity expands. He's not just the one who endured, he's also the one who's rebuilding. At this stage, the journey still offers no complete answers. It offers signs, hints that moving forward can mean more than just enduring, that living can include support, personal rhythm, and conscious choices. These signs don't shout, they invite, and the invitation remains open, asking for attention, asking for continuation. It's with this sense of motion, imperfect, real, ongoing, that the story continues, because rebuilding isn't concluding. It's walking with visible scars without letting them define the entire path. And it's precisely at this point where the invisible starts being seen and the process gains form that new possibilities begin appearing. On the horizon of this journey, right below, I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper, because this whole path leads us to a reflection that echoes quietly, yet powerfully. Some wars don't end when the soldier comes home. They just change scenery. They swap external noise for internal turmoil. They trade open fields for the backstage of the mind. And that's where so much continues, happening far from eyes, far from questions, far from simple narratives. The return is often treated as an ending, as if stepping through the front door automatically leaves everything behind. But the hidden truth is, experience doesn't obey symbolic milestones. It extends, seeps into daily decisions, into ways of thinking, into reactions to the world. The journey doesn't end, it transforms. And recognizing this completely changes how we see those who've lived through extreme situations, and also how we see ourselves. There's profound impact in admitting that some battles continue not as failure, but as natural consequence of having lived beyond ordinary limits. This admission demands emotional maturity. It requires letting go of the idea that strength means absence of pain. It means accepting that true transformation includes both visible and invisible scars. The returning soldier carries marks that never asked permission to exist, and ignoring them doesn't erase them, it just pushes them into quieter corners. Along this journey, it becomes clear that invisible pain isn't exclusive to war veterans. It shows up in different contexts in stories that never make headlines. People who keep functioning while something inside begs for pause. People who learn to smile so others wouldn't worry. People carrying entire worlds inside without finding words to express them. Recognizing this expands empathy. It changes how we look, deepens how we listen. This reflection also invites us to examine our collective mindset. How often do we expect others to get over it too quickly? How often do we mistake silence for indifference? How often do we confuse normalcy with emotional health? The answers aren't always comfortable, but they're necessary, because how we respond to invisible suffering can either ease or intensify the weight someone already carries. Behind this story lies an important lesson about presence. Being present isn't about fixing, advising, or speeding up processes. It's about staying, respecting time, accepting that some journeys have no shortcuts. This presence, even quiet, has a rippling impact. It communicates that pain can exist without being denied, that strength can coexist with vulnerability, that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. The transformation born from this understanding isn't loud. It happens in subtle adjustments, more conscious choices, decisions that honor limits, listening that doesn't rush. Gradually, an environment forms where difficult stories can exist without needing justification, where truth isn't forced but invited, where silence isn't abandonment but safe space. And perhaps most importantly, we realize this reflection isn't just about others. It also turns inward. It invites us to look at our own inner wars, at what continued after an apparent ending, at pains we couldn't name, at experiences that shaped who we are today. This honesty with ourselves is essential, not to stay stuck in the past, but to walk forward with greater awareness. When we understand that some wars don't end with the return, we begin to see the rebuilding process with greater respect for pace, for setbacks, for new beginnings. The soldier in this story isn't defined by what he lived, but by how he keeps living despite it. And that distinction changes everything. The narrative continues because life continues. With open questions, forming possibilities, still timid but real movements. The path keeps unfolding, asking for attention to details, to encounters, to choices that emerge when awareness expands. Nothing is finished. Only more layers are being revealed, more truths finding space, more humanity being recognized. And if this reflection touched something inside you, if at any moment you thought of someone or of yourself, please leave a note below. Comment, "This makes sense to me." Asterisk if you've made it this far, it's because this conversation found a place within you. And when that happens, it's worth continuing. Subscribing to the channel is a simple way to keep stories like this alive, to stay tuned to reflections that go beneath the surface, and to walk alongside themes that call for more listening than rushing. If at any moment you felt this message spoke directly to you, leave a comment below with something like, "This message was for me." That creates a quiet connection among those who watched, those who shared, and those who haven't arrived yet but will.
And if this content resonated with you, hitting like helps signal that this kind of storytelling matters, that deep conversations still have a place here. Nothing forced, just a natural gesture from someone who felt the exchange happened. Oh, and there's a video right over here that complements this topic and dives even deeper into this journey. Click it and keep going with me, same pace, same attentive presence.